Greetings, all praising the King. Welcome as we come together on this holy day. The Lord has brought us to chapter 16 of the book of Acts, where Paul has taken his apostle Silas to journey to speak of Jah truth, to bring followers onto our faith, and meeting Timothy in our way. Paul comes to a city called Macedonia by way of a dream Paul had, and he is met by a woman on the riverside, told as a seller of purple, who has great faith and honors my holy name. And Paul entreats her accordingly. Paul is met also by a damsel who is possessed, who goes about in the street declaring openly that these men have been sent by the Most High, in which Paul is distressed over some time and has the demon is within her cast out, and her pimps, the ones that have made such gain from this so-called soothsayer, accuse Paul, and Paul and Silas are cast into prison, in which they pray at midnight, and a great earthquake comes and opens the doors, loosing the bands from the prisoners. So great of a event that the guard comes trembling to Paul and pleads and says, "Sir, what must I do to be saved?" In which Paul says, "Believe on Lord, the Christ." And this man does so, not by saying, not by making statement, but rather by his action in cleansing Paul of the stripes, for he was beaten before he went into prison, and putting forth meat for giving Paul food. Now the magistrates, those who had condemned Paul and Silas, declare the next day, probably after hearing of this incident, that the men can be freed now. Whereas the guard comes to Paul saying, "You're free." But yet Paul refuses to leave, saying, "They have openly condemned us, being Romans," he says, because of his citizenship status. And let them come and kick us out. In which they do. Paul and Silas are sent away. Now these men are fearful because they had not realized that Paul was, like they might say, one of them, or he was a Roman citizen. So this had changed things because of their custom, of their law. As if in certain countries, people don't have afford rights to foreigners. This is how they're able to cast them into prison for indefinite periods of time. Here, in this pagan system, which was what is the Roman system, there's a period of time where people have to be tried, called the speedy trial. And the burden lays on the accused to declare this. Just as Paul had declared that he was also a citizen of that nation. And in doing so, then he was dealt with differently. The presumed boy who also becomes circumcised at this time, named Timothy, who is a great follower of the faith, and very close to Paul, eventually, has a Greek or pagan father. And so this introduces a person who is not of this so-called pure blood and is saved because he has been called. As Paul had been called not to go and preach in certain places. And yet he was called in a vision in the night or a dream to come to Macedonia. So I listen to the call. When there are certain of us who may proclaim to praise His Majesty, let us be mindful of what Lord has chosen so that we know to discern from the real and the fake. And this is what Paul had did when he was approached by two women, the one seller of purple and the other young damsel that was possessed. And yet, even though the damsel had used the right words, her spirit wasn't right. So Paul knew. So he had cast that demon out of her. Now is known as the spirit of divination, or she was told to be a soothsayer. But whatever her occupation was, it was not right with Jah. And therefore, when Paul had cast out this devil, she no longer was good for those servants of evil, the merchants who had profited from her works, because she had come to know Jah. Just as the keeper of the prison had come to know. As he was saved. So, seek first the kingdom, and all will be given unto you. So listen to the Creator, what the Creator has to say. There will be the truth.